It's Mo. It is November, so we are getting towards the end of the year, and I still haven't read my books off of my 20 books I found out about in 2020 that I want to read in 2021 list. I haven't read the books off of my 21 books I found out about in 2021 and I wanted to read in 2022 list, and I definitely haven't read all of the books off of my 22 books I found out about in 2022 and I wanted to read in 2023 list. So we're coming up to the time of year where I'm going to have to pick my new list for 2024, and I haven't even finished any of my previous lists. So I wanted to start working on 20 books I found out about in 2020 and read some of the ones I haven't read yet. So the books that I haven't read yet off of that list are Moon of the Crusted Snow by Washa Big Rice, The Coldest Girl in Cold Town by Holly Jackson, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, and The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones. I also had on there The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, but since making this list, I've become disinterested in that book, so I crossed it off. All the other books I have already read, and I have vlogged some of them, not all of them, and I will leave some of those vlogs down below. So I want to read at least 2 more books off of this list before the end of 2023. I own The Bone Houses. That's the only one that I actually own. I know I can get a copy of all the other ones on audio. I have picked Moon of the Crusted Snow by Washa Big Rice. So this is a Indigenous Canadian author writing about an Indigenous Canadian community living on a reservation, and they are mostly cut off. They're up in Canada. It's very cold. It's a very remote location, and they're mostly cut off from most of civilization. They've recently got power and food and TV and cell phone reception on the res in the last couple of years, and the people have quickly become accustomed to this. The main character that we are following, Evan, I think his name is Evan, lives on the res with his wife and his children. He's always lived there. He has not wanted to leave the reservation, but he does want to get back to his native roots, and he wants to learn more about his heritage and about his culture, so he's been working on that. He hunts and provides food for his family that way, as well as working for the reservation to clear roads in the winter and do other like municipal tasks. Evan is out for a hunt and he bags a really big moose. He's excited because he knows that winter is setting in and it is going to snow soon, and he wants to have as much meat reserved for his family as he can, as much other items that he can get for his family as opposed to buying them in the store. And that's kind of the beginning of the story. We meet him, we meet a couple of people that he knows and that he works with. We meet his wife and his kids and kind of learn about their lives. It's a very atmospheric book. It feels very remote. It's told in a very kind of matter-of-fact, distanced way, but you do feel close to Evan and his family, and you feel for how much he wants to protect and care for his family, and you feel for how much he wants to do that for his extended family as well. His parents, his sister, his brother, who's kind of a, lazy character, and then the entire village loses cell service. And then the entire village loses satellite service. And it becomes an emergency when the snow starts falling. Evan, because he works for the municipality, is able to have kind of inside information about what the chief and the leader is going to do. He gets to see kind of firsthand some of the conversations that the council has about how to take care of this problem and what might be going on. And it just gets more sinister and claustrophobic and atmospheric, more closed in, more isolated, more cold, more worrisome as the book goes on. I'm about 3/4 of the way through this one already. I'm reading it on audio. I really love the audio narrator. I love the voice of this novel. I love how quiet it is. I love how there is a creeping dread, certainly not the kind of creeping dread I don't like. I don't like the kind of creeping dread when you know a character is going to do something wrong, when you know they're making the wrong choice and you can't do anything to stop them, and you know that the book is doing that as a device to make you feel something. You might know I don't like forced emotion. I don't like it when books, movies, music pushes me to feel something. I like to come to the feelings on my own. And I think that this book has a creeping dread because it's got a lot of scary things in it. The idea of starvation, the idea of isolation, the idea of cold. Like, I don't like to be cold, so any books that have that super cold, enclosed atmosphere are very scary to me. So the creeping dread is just the natural entropy of life, and that if you have no food and you have no communication and you are in an isolated, cold place, bad things are eventually going to happen. So that is the kind of creeping dread that this book has, and it's definitely tense and intense and hard to read. So I've actually put down this book for a little while I just have to read the end. I'm 3/4 of the way in. I'm a quarter from the end, and the events that have happened, like, I don't want to tell you too much because this is definitely a book you should go into and just read and just experience for yourself. But the events that have happened, I don't understand how they're going to wrap up in this last little bit of the book. And I know that this book has recently got a sequel, so I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm a little bit hesitant to continue because of that just dreadful feeling. Not the kind that I hate, but the other kind. So let me know if you've read this book, and let me know what other book you think I should read, if not The Bone Houses. I'm definitely going to try and read that one. I'll give it an attempt. It is a YA book, so I don't know if that will be the one that I end up reading by the end of the year, but hopefully I will get to read one more before 2024. If you've read Moon of the Crusted Snow, let me know what you thought of it in the comments below. When I started compiling the footage for this vlog, I realized that November was the first month that we brought Chips inside. So Chips started out as an outdoor cat. We've seen him in the neighborhood for 6 years or more. Made friends with him about a year before we brought him in. So I thought it would be fun to enjoy some Chips footage and some other cat footage from around that time while I talk about Moon of the Crusted Snow. So somehow, I'm not sure how, I lost the footage, or I can't find the footage, or I never actually filmed an outro for this vlog. You can see more of my thoughts of Moon of the Crusted Snow in my wrap-up for November of 2023. I really enjoyed Moon of the Crusted Snow. I thought it was really interesting and compelling, and it definitely left an impact on me while being like a quick and easy read as well. There was a lot of that creeping dread, and kind of at the end of this book, you are overcome by a lot of the factors that are going into possibly harming this community, and this community having to fight for survival. So there's, obviously the snow, whatever is going on in the world that have caused communications to be ceased, and then there's other factors from both inside the community and outside the community that come into play. The end of the book is a little bit ambiguous as to exactly what is happening, but you're more invested in what this community is going to do, how they're going to move forward now that they are completely cut off from society, whether they have hope or not to rejoin society, what the plan is going to be moving forward for this community of people, how they're going to cope with everything that comes next. So Moon of the Crusted Snow was a great way, definitely a horror, to kick off this vlog, reading some of the 20 books that I found out about in 2020 that I wanted to read in 2021. And later I did end up reading the sequel to Moon of the Crusted Snow, which is Moon of the Turning Leaves, and I'm super excited to see if this series continues as well. I decided against reading The Bone Houses. I am a mood reader, and sometimes it's hard to make a plan and stick with it, so I didn't end up reading The Bone Houses for the rest of this vlog, but keep watching to see what I did read. Who's out there? Who's out there? I started this vlog a very long time ago, and my intention was to only do books off of my 20 books I found out about in 2020, and I wanted to read in 2021 list. But I don't think that's going to happen. Well, not anytime soon anyway. I think I started this vlog in like November or December of last year, and I'm still working on it. But I have started A Lady for a Duke, which it was on my 22 books I found out about in 2020, no, 21 books I found out about in 2021 and wanted to read in 2022. So I am 25% in on this audiobook. I am reading it because it is now April, and I am reading it for Trans Girl April because Alexis Hall is a trans author, and this is a trans romance, which is so exciting. I've never read a transgender romance, and this is also a Regency romance. I've never read a Regency romance, and I have to say it was a little tough going in the beginning. I considered DNFing it, and it's still a possibility because I am only 25% in. So if it continues, or if it starts again to not go in the direction that I wanted to go in, maybe I will end up DNFing it at some point. But right now, I've kind of gotten over the first hump, and that first hump was that it is like both slow and fast. So the story of this is that we have Viola, who has returned from the war as Viola. She was in the war, and her previous life was as a different person, and the war and her seeming death gave her the opportunity to become the person that she actually is. She ended up returning to some family members, and they accepted her as who she is, and now she lives with them not as a family member but as a lady's companion to her sister-in-law. So her sister-in-law is very nosy, very pushy, very matter of fact, but she also is a very understanding and kind person at the heart of it, and she saw that who Viola is now is the true person of Viola, and she accepted her and the role that Viola now needed to play. Circumstances led to Viola and her mistress needing to go to Viola's former life best friend's house and check on him. He was in the war with Viola's former self, and he is devastated by the loss of his friend. He's devastated by the war. He's addicted to laudanum, and he is drinking too much. And Lady Morley, who is Viola's companion, or Viola is her companion, thinks that he is not taking care of his little sister, who they watched during the war when he was away at war. So we have Gracewood. So we have Gracewood, who was best friends with Viola in her former life. He's a mess, so Viola is trying to help him. So like, they've only been there a day or two, I guess, but already it seems like they've been there forever, and like already Lady Morley is like, oh, you're helping him, but they've only talked like a handful of times, and they've only been together for a few days. So time is moving very slowly, but they're like, oh, you already accomplished all these things, and like they're already kind of falling in love as they should and all that stuff. So on the other hand, it's moving very quickly. So definitely the biggest hump for me, I think, is getting over the slow, fast problem, and I think for me that was just like rearranging my mindset and just like going with it, and you know, suspending your disbelief and just like letting it happen. But now that that has happened, we're at this point where Viola and Gracewood are connecting, and I'm like, how is there 11 more hours to this audiobook? So I think the next hump is going to be what action happens and how slow burn this slow burn romance is actually going to be. I'm not used to reading slow burn romances. I'm much more used to like contemporary romances, and even those I don't read a ton of. So I'm excited to continue, but there is still a possibility that I will DNF. Other than that, I am enjoying it. I liked that the story set you down absolutely in the middle, and you had to kind of figure out everybody's timeline and what was going on. It is not explicitly stated that Viola's past is talked about directly, but it is not explicitly stated. I guess you could say that Viola's transgender. It's just that they talk about it as that was her former life that she couldn't continue to live in, and this is her actual life and her current life, and she's very lucky and in a very wonderful place of privilege in this time because she has people who accept her, because she has a livelihood, because she's able to be herself, obviously at a time when other people could not, but she's in a precarious position nonetheless, because at any moment that could be taken away from her. And if the wrong people were to find out, or if the right people were to take it the wrong way, it could be serious repercussions for everyone involved. So it's very interesting, and I am enjoying it so far. It is a little, just romance-wise, it's a little like, eye-rolly, you know, but it's also very sweet and cute, and like there's some nice little touches. I really like Grace Wood's sister, Miranda. She's a little quirky, and I do really like Lady Morley as well. So I'm going to continue with this, and maybe we will turn this vlog that was 20 books I found out about in 2020 into a mishmash of books that I found out about and wanted to read in. So I have finished The Lady for a Duke, and I was gonna update you, A Lady for a Duke. I have finished A Lady for a Duke, and I was gonna update you once I hit like almost a steamy scene. Like my idea was like right before a steamy scene I would update you, and then maybe like update you after that or whatever, but I ended up just reading the rest of the book and I really enjoyed it. I think that the out of time element of like not knowing how long different things were taking definitely did continue through this book, but I think that I just got kind of used to it and it didn't bother me as much. Since I'm unfamiliar with the Regency era, Regency romance in general, I didn't necessarily get everything that I could have gotten out of this, but maybe this isn't a good example of that. Like I have no idea since I don't read Regency romances and I don't know anything about the Regency era. I don't even know when that took place. I could look it up, obviously, but I think for me, maybe that and the kind of skipping around in time, not sure how long different aspects of the book were like added to it, and it was like together it kind of made it a weird out of time kind of book. There were some steamy scenes, nothing too crazy, but what I liked about the steamy scenes is that they didn't go the way that I expected them to. Not that the steam was weird or anything about it was unexpected in that way. It was just how the characters talked about it and how they felt about it, and the roles that they took within the steamy scenes was really interesting, and just how it developed their relationship as well, and like how it impacted how they thought of each other to a certain degree. I mean, as steaminess would for anyone. I thought that was a really interesting aspect. I do think that I suffered a little bit in this reading because there was so much acceptance and there was so much open-mindedness of different characters, and so many people were totally fine with queerness, with transness, with sexuality, with all these different things that were part of this book. And it was such an open and understanding and loving book, and that so many people were open and understanding to queer people, to trans people, that it felt a little unrealistic. And obviously this shouldn't be a realistic book, and you should revel in that and you should rejoice in it and you should feel good about the fantasy of it and about the utopianness of it and about the idealism of it. Like, it should be wonderful, right? Like, I should have loved that, but because I'm so used to things being horrible, because I'm so used to queerness being used as an excuse for violence, because I'm so used to trans violence, because I'm so used to all those things, it was really hard to suspend my disbelief in that aspect a little bit, which is something that I wasn't expecting and I feel bad about. Like, I wish I could have just enjoyed it more and been more open-minded myself towards it and felt more at ease with the joy of it, the queer joy and the trans joy of it, because there was a lot of queer and trans joy. There was a lot of body euphoria, and there was a lot of just reveling in the trans experience, which was awesome. There was also, of course, hardships that the trans people went through, There was hardships that queer people went through. There was violence, and there was bigotry and prejudices that happen, but you need some of that to propel the story, and you need some aspect that's a little bit more realistic to the actual experience, but you don't need it all the time to the extent that most books that I read do. I read so many books that are about violence against women, that are about violence against queer people and trans people. So it's like nice and refreshing to read something different, but sometimes it's hard to wrap your mind around, and it's sometimes hard to get behind the idea of being at ease with joy. I'm finding it very difficult these days. I've talked about it in other aspects of reading and other aspects of storytelling. Now I am finished with A Lady for a Duke. I'm super glad that I read it. I'm very happy, and I'm glad that it made it into this vlog, because initially I started this vlog way back in December. It's now May. My initial idea was to read a bunch of books off of my 20 books I found out about in 2020 that I wanted to read in 2021 list, and I read Moon of the Crusted Snow. So this is my bullet journal. This is an old bullet journal from July 2023 to January 2024, and this is where I still have my lists, because I'm using like a mini bullet journal right now, so I didn't want to rewrite these lists. But here is my 2020 books, and I ended up not reading another one off of that yet. I ended up reading Lady for a Duke, which was on my 22 books I found out about in 2022, and I wanted to read in 2023 list. So I'm excited that I got to check off another one of those, and when I rewrite this list, it's going to be very exciting. But so what I figured I would do in this vlog to kind of round it out, to kind of wrap it up, was read a book off of my 21 books I found out about in 2021, and I want to read in 2022 list. I have a couple of these books. I have a couple that I recently got, and I have a couple things that I could choose from. I did recently get The Chosen and The Beautiful by Nevo, which would be a really good one to read because it is May, which is Native Hawaiian, American, Asian, and Pacific Islander month, Heritage Month, so that would be a good one to read. I also have The Lamplighters by Emma Stonix, which I've really been wanting to read. I also have Salvage the Bones by Jesmyn Ward, which I really do want to read, but there's animal violence in it, so I don't think that's the way to go for me. It is also horror mayhem this month, and I have not been reading a lot of horror recently. So what I decided to go with was Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. I've never read any Catherine M. Valente, but I do have some books from her, and the first book that I ever heard of was Comfort Me with Apples, which is a super short novella all about a woman who seemingly has a perfect life. So the audiobook for this is only 2 hours and 20 minutes, which means that I'll get through it very, very quickly. So I probably won't even check in with you, but that means we've rounded it out in this vlog and done a 2020 book, a 2021 book, and a 2022 book. So I think that'll be fun. Let me come back to you with my thoughts on Cover Me with Apples, and then we'll do a little wrap up of this vlog experiment. I also like that we did a horror, a romance, and now we're doing another horror. I'm back, and I have completed the last book for this very rambly, very long, very drawn out vlog about books off of the book lists that I've created over my years in Booktube. The last book that I read for this vlog, Cover Me With Apples, was really quick, super easy to read. It's like a 2-hour audiobook or something. I read it on audio. I've been wanting to read this book since 2021, so I was super happy to get to it. In 2021, when this book came out, a lot of people talked about Cover Me With Apples, and they talked about certain aspects of this story. I definitely thought that this book was going to be this trope or this thing or this device. And I definitely thought that I knew what it was, and I was happy to still read it, and I was happy, you know, whatever, to know, like, it doesn't matter. It didn't affect my enjoyment, or I didn't think it would affect my enjoyment. But I didn't know what this book was about. So I would say that that was one aspect of this book that was really surprising and interesting, was I thought I knew what I was getting into, and then I didn't know what I was getting into. It does become obvious at a certain point in the book what the story is going to do, where the story is going to go, what the tropes are going to be, and that's fine too. That was the point where I was surprised. That was the point where things changed, and I was very glad for it, and I was along for the ride. Now, I thought I was really going to love this book, and I didn't like love it. I liked it a lot. I enjoyed it. I definitely want to read more Catherine M. Valente. I have one other book of hers on my TBR. I have a physical book of hers on my TBR, but like every book that she's ever written seems interesting. So I definitely will read more of her work. Is this horror? Yes, it's horror. I would say if you want a short psychological horror, suspense, thriller kind of book, this is a good one. It's super easy, super fast paced, very quick audiobook. I really enjoyed the audio narrator. I'm sure you could read it physically in a couple of hours as well. So those were 3 books starting last year in 2023 that I read off of my various lists. I read Moon of the Crusted Snow, which was on my 20 books I found out about in 2020 that I wanted to read in 2021 list. I read Cover Me With Apples, which was on my 21 books I found out about in 2021 and I wanted to read in 2022 list. And I read A Lady for a Duke, which was on my 22 books I found out about in 2022 and wanted to read in 2023 list. So I definitely made progress on all these lists. I only have 3 books off of my 2020 list, so that's very exciting. I could definitely theoretically like knock those out and that list would be done. I have read quite a few off of my 2021 list, and I have a bunch of the books from that. So I own physically 3 or 4 books off of that list, which is exciting. So again, if I wanted to, I could definitely make a lot of progress on that list. And then my 2022 list is the one that I've read the least off of, but I have a plan for that, so stay tuned. This was a really fun project. It didn't go in the direction that I wanted it to. It wasn't as timely as I would have wanted it to be, but I'm super glad to have read these books, and I'm glad to make progress on all these lists. Let me know if you have like book lists or TBRs that are lingering, that are languishing, that you have, that you try to make progress on every once in a while. Let me know what progress you're making on those. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.